But drought and famine were India's chronic problems, and millions had to be provided with food and jobs. Drought was often followed by floods, devastating floods, inundating millions of hectares of land. Steps were taken to harness the water of the wayward rivers, to control floods for irrigation, and to generate electricity. The Damodar Valley Corporation and many river valley projects were completed, including the Bhakra Nangal Canal system.
The outstanding event from our point of view has been the inauguration of the Bhakra Nangal Canal system. Vast numbers of people rejoiced at the prospect of life-giving water spreading over Punjab and Rajasthan. There are 360 million problems in India. For each individual is a problem for us, and his well-being is our concern.
To understand the people, their problems, their dreams and aspirations, he traveled to every part of the country.
I went to Ladakh in the far north. As I stood in the small gardens, or more frequently, the bleak wastes of Ladakh, I thought of the infinite variety of our country. How many of us have an understanding and emotional appreciation of this tremendous richness and variety of India? Because we do not wholly appreciate this, we try to regiment the whole of India into a single pattern.
Lessons from the past offer the best solution for unity.
I thought how wise our ancestors were in their large-hearted tolerance and human understanding. The ageless tradition of India, which allowed each culture to have scope for growth. Culture, like a flower, does not take kindly to forced growth. Compulsion crushes it and makes it lifeless.
In their infinite variety of languages, dress, and way of life, the people provided an excellent example of unity in diversity, which had to be sustained. Nehru considered multilingual states to be vital for Indian unity and said,
"If people speaking different languages cannot live together, India will not survive as a nation."
However, cracks started appearing in an apparently solid foundation of Indian unity. Potti Sri Ramalu went on a hunger strike demanding the formation of a Telugu-speaking state. On his death, violence generated by the interested parties forced the central cabinet to concede the demand. Nehru wrote,
"We have disturbed the hornet's nest, and I believe most of us are likely to be badly stung."
More hornets and more demands led to the redrawing of the map of India on a linguistic basis. Even the cosmopolitan, politically enlightened state of Bombay was divided into Maharashtra and Gujarat. The People's Republic of China came to power in Beijing. India recognized the new government. India had a long border with Tibet, an autonomous region of China. India advised China to allow the Tibetans maintain their distinct identity. In order to safeguard India's traditional ties of trade and culture with Tibet, an agreement based on the 5 principles of peaceful coexistence was signed with China. War broke out in Korea. India voted for the United Nations resolution naming North Korea the aggressor. India supported the peace initiative, and the United Nations accepted the resolution on the prisoners of war, which said,
"Force shall not be used against prisoners to prevent or effect their return to their motherland."
A neutral nations repatriation commission, headed by India's General Thimaya, carried out the onerous task. When conflicts erupted in Indochina, Nehru said,
"Asia will continue to be a scene of war in which Asians are made to fight Asians." This is what has happened in Indochina.
The Prime Ministers of Sri Lanka, India, Indonesia, Burma, and Pakistan met in Colombo and called upon the Western powers to allow the people of Indochina to settle their own future without intervention by the great powers. At the Geneva Conference, India worked behind the scenes and played a significant role in bringing about peace in Indochina. India was the chairman of the International Control Commission to supervise the ceasefire. India's role in diffusing world tension was appreciated. To Delhi came leaders of many nations for consultations and on goodwill visits. Zhou Enlai, the Prime Minister of the People's Republic of China, agreed with Nehru that Asia should be developed as an area of peace. In the autumn of 1954, when Nehru visited China, he raised the question of India's border with China and complained that the Chinese maps had shown large parts of Indian territory as Chinese. Zhou Enlai assured him that they were old maps and that China had had no time to revise them. He met Mao Zedong and recalled that time and time again, India had pleaded for China's admission to the United Nations. Nehru also requested the Chinese leaders to release the American prisoners held by them. Nehru was happy that Asia was emerging as a powerful force.
That has happened and is happening is this awakening or upsurge in Asia and to some extent in Africa. It's a tremendous thing. It has upset completely the old order. But the main thing is this enormous upsurge. In a sense, after 300 or 400 years of, more or less European domination, Asia is coming into its own.
29 countries of Asia and Africa met at Bandung on 18th April 1955.
Taking an overall view of the picture, it seemed to me that the conference was a remarkable success. Speaking for myself, I got a much better measure of many well-known people who attended this conference than I had before.
President Sukarno inaugurated the conference.
The 5 principles of peaceful coexistence were reformulated into 10 for the promotion of world peace and cooperation.
Asia is dynamic. Asia is alive, full of life. Well, if there is one thing that Asia wants to tell them, it is this. No dictation. There is going to be in future no yes men in Asia, I hope, or in Africa. And we have to live up to what we have said and what we have thought. And even more so, we have to live up to what the world expects to us, what Asia expects us, what the millions of these two continents expect us. I hope we will be worthy of the people's faith and our destiny.
At Bandung, a new peace initiative started to emerge. Stockpiling of the weapons of war. And the Cold War continued to haunt the world.
Cold War means nourishing the idea of war in the minds of men. Therefore, I submit to you that this idea of a Cold War is essentially, fundamentally wrong. It is immoral. It is opposed to all ideas of peace and cooperation.
At Hiroshima, Jawaharlal paid homage to the victims of the first atom bomb used on the civilian population in the Second World War. The memories of the Holocaust were still fresh, but the military blocs were carrying out nuclear tests.
Still we find that the race of armaments continues, and so also the effort to find ever more powerful engines of destruction.
The hydrogen bomb test at Bikini Atoll placed in human hands seemingly unlimited thermonuclear energy, having the destructive power of millions of tons of TNT.
Fear and hatred overshadow the world. If even a small part of this effort was directed to the search for peace, probably the problem of disarmament would have been solved by this time. For as everyone knows, the choice today in this nuclear age is one between utter annihilation and the destruction of civilization, or of some way to have peaceful coexistence between nations.
In June 1955, Jawaharlal Nehru visited the Soviet Union and East European countries as a messenger of peace and goodwill. He was the first head of a government to receive such a tremendous reception from the Soviet masses. He had predicted the changes that were to come 35 years later.
You have to have large-scale education, a very good education, because ultimately education and right life is the biggest liberating factor of a man.
Czechoslovakia seemed to be a very unhappy country. Poland produced a different impression upon me. The most gruesome place we visited was Auschwitz, the former Nazi concentration camp where millions of Jews were done to death.
In Yugoslavia,
I had long talks with Marshal Tito and his ministers. There was so much in common between our outlooks and Marshal Tito's in regard to world affairs that we could discuss matters without any inhibition. From Brioni, we went to Rome, especially to see the Pope.
he also visited the statue of his childhood hero, Garibaldi.
From Rome, I went by a special aircraft sent me by the British government. Sir Anthony Eden met me at the airport and took me to Chequers, where we had talks.
What were the impressions you gained in Moscow and in your tour of Russia? Do you think there's a genuine desire on the part of the Russian leaders to work for an easement of world tension?
I am convinced that there is this desire to work for this lessening of world tensions and in regard to disarmament also, or progressive general disarmament, and to devote their energies and their resources far more to internal development.
Winston Churchill had written, "My dear Nehru, I always admire your ardent wish for peace and the absence of bitterness in your consideration of the antagonism that in the past divided us. Remember the light of Asia." He returned home to a hero's welcome as a messenger of peace, Shanti Dut. On being awarded the nation's highest honor, Jawaharlal was emotionally moved.
इससे बढ़कर मैं और कुछ नहीं कर सकता, उन्हें भारत रत्न की उपाधि प्रदान करूं, जो हमारे देश का सर्वोच्च राष्ट्रपति जी, मुझे कठिनाई में डाल दिया। यूं भी आप सब लोगों के, आपके राष्ट्रपति जी, जो पुराने हमारे साथी और नेता हैं, और इतने यहाँ लोग बैठे हैं जिनके साथ जमाने से काम कर रहे हैं, हम मिलकर इस पुराने जमाने को सोचकर, जब आप, हम और हजारों लाखों लोग इस मुल्क के साथ मिलकर हमने काम किया, कभी ऊंचा देखा, कभी नीचा, कामयाबी हासिल की, कठिनाई है फिर भी सामने है, तो सिर्फ एक ही दिल में ख्वाहिश कि जहां तक ताकत है इस काम को करते जाएं।
At the Avadi Congress, Jawaharlal Nehru's resolution on economic policy was adopted.
We aim to work for the establishment of a socialistic pattern of society in India, where there will not be great differences between the rich and the poor.
With the launching of the second five-year plan, India entered the industrial age.
We have to advance on two fronts simultaneously. There is the food and agriculture front, which is of first importance, and there is the heavy industry front, which is essential for industrialization.
Many industries were set up to create a self-reliant and self-sufficient economy. India's first nuclear reactor was dedicated to the nation in 1956.
Swimming pool reactor Apsara. Whatever might happen, whatever the circumstances, we shall never use this atomic energy for evil purposes.
India built more reactors to use atomic energy for peaceful purposes in agriculture and industry, health and power generation. India modernized her armed forces purely for defense purposes. The Navy acquired the second cruiser, INS Mysore, and India's first aircraft carrier, Vikrant. The Indian Air Force received more sophisticated jets. most of India's river valley projects were completed.
Bhakra Nangal is a tremendous affair. The very size of it is very impressive. And to dare to take up such a huge undertaking shows confidence in oneself and our future.
Agricultural scientists helped increase food production, but Nehru warned the farmers against complacency.
दुनिया बढ़ी है साल 2 साल से, सिर्फ थोड़ा सा हमें इत्मीनान हुआ खाने के मामले में। ये ना समझिएगा तो सवाल हल हो गया। अगर कोई समझता है तो हम फिर धोखे में पड़ जाएंगे। लेकिन कम से कम इस समय हम इतना कह सकते हैं कि इस सवाल को काबू में हम ले आए।
May I ask, Mr. Prime Minister, is there any possibility that India will be more or less self-sufficient in food in the course of time?
There's not only a possibility, but I should imagine a certainty, and not in the course of time, but in the near future, in the course of a year or two.
He may not have excelled in any of the games he played, but as Prime Minister, he took keen interest in the promotion of sports. He laid the foundation stone of the National Stadium in New Delhi. In 1951, the first Asian Games were held at New Delhi. When Edmund Hillary and Tenzing Norgay climbed Everest in 1953, he met the members of the team.
I've had the pleasure of meeting the Everest party, and in particular, Tenzing. The final ascent of Everest has been a great achievement in which we should all take pride.
Inspired by their feat, the Himalayan Mountaineering Institute was set up in Darjeeling for the training of Indian youth. Jawaharlal Nehru met the members of various successful mountaineering expeditions. He was proud of the success of all Indian sportsmen. Mihir Sen, the first Indian to swim the English Channel. Milkha Singh, the flying Sikh. Jawaharlal Nehru was proud of India's rich heritage.
I visited old monuments and ruins and saw ancient sculptures and frescoes. There seemed to me something unique about the continuity of a cultural tradition through 5,000 years of history.
The relics of Buddha's two disciples, Sariputta and Mahamoggallana, were brought back from the Victoria and Albert Museum, London, and enshrined at Sanchi. India celebrated the 2500th anniversary of Gautama Buddha's Mahaparinirvan. At the suggestion of Maulana Azad, the Indian Council of Cultural Relations and several academies of arts and letters were established to promote and preserve India's rich cultural heritage and encourage budding artists and writers.
The vitality of the group and individual art of a society is measured by the extent to which it possesses courage and, above all, creative imagination.
Jawaharlal believed in the purity of all religious thoughts for the promotion of national unity.
Nothing is more advantageous and more creditable than a rich heritage, but nothing is more dangerous than to sit back and live on that heritage.
Nehru's concern was always the people of India.
For many months, I wandered about India, and millions of faces passed before my eyes. I saw 1,000 facets of this country of mine in all their rich diversity, and yet always with the unifying impress of India upon them.
He liked to meet the tribal people who had suffered due to the neglect of centuries.
I was attracted to them simply because I felt happy and at home with them. The tribal people are virile. They're highly disciplined. They're often more democratic than most others.
Jawaharlal advised the state governments that tribal rights to land and forests should be respected, and these areas should not be over-administered. To keep alive the folk culture and traditions of India, he organized folk dance festivals as part of the annual Republic Day celebrations in Delhi. Jawaharlal loved to participate in the cultural activities of the people. Rabindranath Tagore had called him Rituraj, the king of seasons. In 1956, President Tito of Yugoslavia, Colonel Nasser, and Jawaharlal Nehru met at Brioni Islands to chalk out a common strategy for the economic cooperation and peaceful coexistence. A few days later, when the United States of America announced the withdrawal of economic aid to Egypt for the construction of the Aswan Dam, President Nasser nationalized the Suez Canal to raise the necessary finances. India pleaded for a negotiated settlement because 70% of her trade passed through the canal. France and England, the major shareholders of the Suez Canal Company, threatened military action. India pleaded for restraint, and Nehru advised Nasser to be fair to France and England. The talks failed on the question of international control. Israel launched a preemptive attack against Egypt. France and England joined the invasion. Jawaharlal Nehru appealed to the United Nations and the United States to intervene.
I cannot imagine a worse case of aggression.
The United Nations Security Council called for a ceasefire and the complete withdrawal of all foreign forces from the occupied territory. India was one of the countries asked to provide troops to the United Nations emergency force to maintain peace along the armistice demarcation line. Around the same time in Hungary, the Soviet army ruthlessly crushed a popular uprising against the communist regime.
I have no doubt that the action of the Russian government is deplorable.
He visited Washington for talks with President Eisenhower, with whom he had a very cordial relationship.
Recently, we have witnessed two tragedies which have powerfully affected men and women all over the world. These are the tragedies in Egypt and Hungary, but even these tragedies have one hopeful aspect, for they have demonstrated that the most powerful countries cannot revert to old colonial methods or impose their domination over weak countries.
Nehru enjoyed a reputation as a crusader for peace. He was invited by leaders of the world for consultations, be it Paris or Bonn, Tokyo or London, Stockholm, Helsinki or Copenhagen. Loved and admired by the people of Asia and Africa.
India's championship of freedom and racial equality in Asia as well as in Africa is a natural urge of the facts of geography and history.